Welcome, my dear friends. It's good to see you. I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an enjoyer of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic readings of my stories, I provide role-playing game reviews, and I interview interesting people. On this episode, we're going to look at an old adventure that I absolutely love, and that is Treasure Hunt. Published for the first edition of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, Treasure Hunt is an adventure for 0-level characters, who over the course of this adventure are going to earn their class, their first level, and even their alignment. And to give you an idea of what's coming, to set the stage, let's read from the back of the module and see how it sells itself. Even if you're not into role-playing games, stick around for the story and how people shape our decisions. Marooned on a barren isle, the island of Villadel, the mighty Sea King was sacked by a pirate army 60 years ago. Its destruction was so complete that even the location of the island is lost and forgotten. Despite the rumors of immense treasure still hidden in the ruined stronghold, no one ever found the Sea King's island again. Until now. Through a cruel twist of fate, a small band of unwilling adventurers is washed ashore on a small barren island and discovers what remains of Villadel's settlement. But they aren't alone. Marauding orcs and goblins have found the island too, and are frantically searching for the lost hoard. In this desperate treasure hunt, the real payoff may be survival. Treasure Hunt is different from other AD&D game adventures. The player characters begin the game at 0 level without choosing a class, and must work their way up to first level. It is perfect for a group of beginning players or experienced players looking for a new and different challenge. Well, that kind of thing is right up my alley. I find it very interesting, and I hope you do too. Past this part of the review, there will be spoilers, so proceed only with that caveat in mind. With that warning out of the way, one of the things that makes this adventure unique is that your 0th level normal people characters get to meet a goddess. And no, I don't mean 90s supermodel Cindy Crawford goddess. I mean a lightning bolt happy, judgment passing goddess, an angry divinity, and you get to befriend her if you're smart. And so, with that out of the way, let's take a look at this thing. So in this review, I'm not going to go over every page of the adventure. I'm not just going to read it to you, but there's some key points I want to talk about. The credits list Aaron Allston as the writer of Treasure Hunt, and while this was his first module for TSR, they would certainly put his skill at explaining the game to new players and DMs to good use in the future. Allston became a prominent figure in the basic D&D line, richly developing the basic setting Mystara, which is an awesome world to play in. If you don't, I'd recommend it. And eventually being the one responsible for my one and only desert island book, the D&D Rule Cyclopedia. That book has every conceivable thing you need to run any style of D&D adventure for any level, from low-level punks to kings to achieving godhood. It's all in there. Also note that the editor is Steve Winter, and his name pops up in a lot of the books I love the most. He wrote the Complete Psionics Handbook for 2nd edition AD&D, which made the Psionicist my favorite class to this day. He wrote the 3rd edition of Boot Hill and was a principal editor for the 2nd edition Spelljammer setting. With cover art done by Jeff Easley, if you aren't familiar with his works, do yourself a favor and Google Jeff Easley and Dragonlance. Be prepared to be impressed. The interior art is done by Stephen Fabian, a particular favorite of mine. I've got a number of his prints in my collection, and note his use of stark contrast in black and white. While he has worked in many styles, it was this style he perfected that helped make the Ravenloft campaign setting so memorable and evocative of its gothic horror atmosphere. In an adventure where you go from 0 to first level, character generation is an important aspect of this module. You do roll your stats, and you select or roll for your character's secondary skills, like being an armorer or a tailor in the life they lived before becoming an adventurer. Fortunately, since in 1st and 2nd edition D&D, commoners had 1d6 hit points. This module maxes you out, starting with 6 hit points to give you a fighting chance, and more if your constitution's high enough, because you start with no equipment, no weapons, and no armor. You may scrounge some during the adventure, but you start with cold-soaked rags on your back and nothing else. Once you earn 500 XP during the adventure, the DM will tell you what class the actions you took and the decisions you made came out as. That's right, the DM tells you what your class is going to be. The adventure gives the DM a special sheet and guidance to track what you do in-game that will determine which class your character is best suited for, as well as their alignment. So, if during the game you play a particularly stealthy character, then your DM is going to put little tick marks next to the thief or the rogue entry. If you're a scumbag who steals from the rest of your party, then they're going to put ticks in the evil alignments. Or you can show off your piousness and earn tick marks towards becoming a cleric, such as if your character prays during the game, if you help restore this temple that we'll talk about in a little bit, and other actions like that. If violence is your first and only go-to in any situation, a fighter, that's probably what you're going to get the most tick marks in. And when the time comes that you've earned the 500 XP and it's time to decide what your class is going to be, the player is certainly free to disagree with the DM and their assessment, and the two should work something out. But I personally would like to be surprised with how my play came out in the character class determination. When I ran it, only 2 out of 6 players got the class they originally planned for, but everyone wound up pleased with the results. For example, we had a character with a strength of 16 and planned to be a fighter, and he was dumb as a box of rocks with an intelligence score of 6. When I told him his excessive acts of piety in the adventure gave cleric his high score, he was surprised, but he decided to go with it. Now in our group, all those who knew of Salah ad-Din, prophet of Astarte, weep at the mention of his name, martyred as he was during a botched ransom attempt and found on his party's doorstep with a Colombian necktie and Blood Eagle combo. May he rest in peace. Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan. I love zero-level adventures where your character is generated through play versus characters designed in a sterile lab where they're often made independent of the world they're supposed to live in. Characters can be cut off from the influences that should shape them, and they run the risk of imparting my precious character syndrome, where you have a single picture in your head of who your character is, how they will develop, and what will happen to them, and freak out if something deviates from that even a little bit. Going through this organic process of generating your character through 1,000 cuts in play, you get to surprise yourself by how they develop. The list of classes the adventure is designed to support is limited to those included in the first edition of the AD&D game, so classes you and your players are interested in may not be addressed. For example, one of my players wanted to play a psionicist, which wasn't contemplated by the module, so I inserted a dowsing rod, a scenario where he could get it along with instruction on how to use it, and away he went, racking up points to get the class he wanted while being guided by a Y-shaped piece of wood in his latent psychic powers. 2 of the players wanted to play a Sha'ir, a type of genie wizard from the Al-Qadim setting, because we were playing an Al-Qadim. So I made sure to throw in 2 chances for them to earn a spirit's friendship and be able to play that. One method was a stoppered bottle pendant that held a little fire genie that the character could convince to join forces, and the other was a dead goblin floating an orc piss down a well. You may be asking how exactly a piss-soaked dead goblin could substitute for a genie, so I will tell you. Since I had 2 players going for Sha'ir, I needed 2 interesting ways they could both do it and come out with a unique story all their own. Since the well was on a temple's grounds, there were at least 2 reasons to fish the dead goblin out of the well. 1, to clean up the temple, and 2, to not leave the remains of the dead in such a shameful state. Once his body was fished out, the goblin's ghost appeared to the character who fished him out and promised to repay the favor, and promptly possess the character benignly, and now and then let himself be known through well-timed farts. While that player eventually decided that Salah ad-Din should go cleric, the ghost goblin would periodically use his spectral powers to do things the party couldn't, but never more than once per adventure. So, speaking of adventure, what is this adventure like? Unlike modern-day character funnels like in Dungeon Crawl Classics, where each player takes a handful of zero-level nobodies, throws them into wildly dangerous situations, and makes player characters out of the few who survive, Treasure Hunt is not intended to be a meat grinder. It features appropriate challenges for level 0 characters, encourages smart actions for the circumstances while rewarding courage, and it makes players think about how this normal person would deal with life or death situations, and so think about the character as they are. There's even advice to the DM to not go all out trying to kill these frail characters, and how to realistically replace them in the sad event one of them dies. Speaking of advice to DMs, Allston's ability to teach new DMs how to do it shines even from the very table of contents. Why do I say that? Well, we start with advice to the players on how their characters work, move to advice just for the DMs, including how the adventure fits together, and then look at the episodes the adventure is organized into. One refreshing thing I found in reading and running this adventure is how everything I needed for each stage of the adventure was conveniently contained in the same episode I was running. If I was running episode 1, the only thing I needed to read was episode 1. Same with episode 2, and so on. Each episode describes everything the DM needs to know, contains all the stat blocks that will come up, and at the end tells the DM how to add up the XP the players earned during that episode. The module provides separate tracker sheets for character development, and even a sheet providing hit point trackers for every enemy in the adventure, which I found super useful. After reading the bloated messes that have been the 5e campaign adventures, this was so nice. Instead of, in the course of a single 5e encounter, having to flip hundreds of pages looking for a key detail I needed buried in a particular paragraph to address a particular encounter, everything I needed was right where I needed it to be. And simplicity in game design and adventure writing is a lost art to Wizards of the Coast, and it shows. I also loved Appendix 1, If Things Go Wrong. Throughout the adventure, and especially in Appendix 1, Allston crammed in all kinds of useful advice for the DM, such as what to do if the characters go wandering off the adventure trail, if the party tries to skip the adventure and instead build a raft to go from episode 1 to home, if they miss key locations and secret doors, what to do. Episode 1 begins with the characters finding themselves shipwrecked on a slave galley along the shore of a rather inhospitable island, former capital now in ruin of the legendary Sea King, pirate lord of history long ago brought low. The adventure is setting info for the Corin Archipelago, which as a generic setting was intended to be dropped into any homebrew or published world. The details are still very evocative, and it was eventually written into the Forgotten Realms and the Moonshae Isles. Shipwrecked with the party are a friend and a foe. Melisana, the daughter of a wealthy shipping merchant, is a fellow victim of the slavers, and as an NPC, she is there to support the party in a number of ways, including conveniently having skills the party doesn't have but needs, like sailing when they eventually find a boat to get off the island. She can also serve as the DM's mouthpiece and give good advice, should the party ask her. The foe is the only surviving slaver, Half-Chris the Half-Orc, now drinking his frustrations with life away on the beach with rum. Time-honored tactic. He is the only enemy in episode 1 besides the hostile weather that will eventually kill the characters with hypothermia if they don't get moving. And once Half-Chris is dealt with, the party moves on to episode 2. In episode 2, we discover that the island is currently being fought over by 2 pirate tribes of humanoids, one of goblins and one of orcs. In a rare pitched battle between the 2 forces, the party sees them fighting over a new captive, a crazy and frail old man known as Kistake. However the players get involved with the battle, they are supposed to rescue the old man, who will be an important guide for them throughout the rest of the adventure. Kistake is the sole survivor of the Sea King's manor staff, and he has been living alone on the island for decades, barely eking by an existence on rats and whatever else he could find. He knows where the Sea King's lost treasure is, as well as a way off the island, which he promises to show the party if they help him. Exhausted as they no doubt are, he leads the party to the Temple of the Goddess in episode 3. Here they find that the patron goddess of the Sea King's temple has been defiled by orcs, who wrecked the place, looted what was left over, and I added details about them leaving orc bodily fluids as exercises and creative finger painting all over the place. The goddess is not given a specific name in the adventure, and the module encourages the DM to pick one from a list of suggestions or to make up their own. Her statue is covered with orc filth, and if a player takes the time to clean it, they will be rewarded with the goddess's blessing. Overnight, the goddess may heal the party to full hit points, which is important since 0-level characters neither have healing spells, nor are there healing potions sitting around after every combat to keep the party going. When the goddess appears to the party, awakening them from their slumber to whoever is on guard, she tells them that she is so mad from the orcs desecrating her temple that she's going to destroy the island. Not just the orcs, not just the orcs and the goblins. She is so mad, she is going to wipe this island and everything on it off the map. But she does tell the party that since you didn't desecrate my temple, I will give you 1 day to get off the island. Not 24 hours, not until midnight, not even until nighttime. When the sun sets, this place is toast. I think that's an awesome way to set a timer on the adventure and keep the players going. The threat of divine cataclysm on all their heads if they don't get moving. It definitely worked on my party, as they moved with a purpose once they found out the clock was ticking. The only major gripe I have with this adventure is that the temple in episode 3 and the manor in episode 4 have huge maps with lots and lots of rooms with nothing in them. These rooms eat up a lot of print, but most of that real estate is empty. For example, the temple has almost 30 numbered rooms on the map, but maybe 5 of them have anything of interest written into them. That's a huge waste of the DM's time reading it, and it would be an inexcusable waste of game time having the party explore room to find one room after another with nothing worth investigating. On top of this many rooms with nothing of value to the adventure in them, the text for each room spends a lot of time talking about how the room used to look before the Sea King's empire went to pot, and then ends with saying, to paraphrase, all you see now is a bunch of broken furniture. I love the writer and the editor dearly as game designers, but we all make mistakes, and they should not have written so much dead space into the adventure. My solution when running it was to describe how the orcs had smashed through so many walls and knocked down doors. So instead of 9 identical and pointless rooms on the second floor of the temple to scope out, the party had one big one on each side to search and be done with. After receiving the goddess's warning, the party should then proceed into episode 4, the Manor of the Sea King. The place is crawling with skirmishing bands of orcs and goblins, who I find were written very realistically, and that neither side was too keen to line up for a pitched battle and fight until everybody was out of hit points. Having served in the army, I can promise you, wanting to die in combat isn't something most people today want to do. So in the real world, there is lots of people taking pot shots at each other, ducking behind cover, and generally trying to scare the other guy off while keeping yourself alive. This psychology also gives the party breaks in the action to sneak up to the manor and get inside, but here again, the layout of the manor has even more dead space than the temple. This long ago ransacked place could eat up entire sessions of game time, pointlessly spent going room to room looking for anything interesting and coming up with next to nothing. Because out of the 59 keyed locations, maybe 10 have anything worth seeing. There are some really cool magic items to be found, but only if the party explores wisely and interacts with their environment to find hidden compartments and magic weapons concealed in plain sight. I wanted them to spend their time finding cool stuff and not room after room of being told the place is trashed and there's nothing of value. Again, we get text describing the opulence of what rooms used to look like, which only distracts the DM from trying to describe to their players what the rooms look like right now. I knew this big waste of time was coming, so I did what any sensible DM equipped with an angry goddess would do in the same situation, and I blew up big chunks of the manor with lightning from the sky. After reading the room descriptions and finding out what was actually worth my players' time, I did a little shifting of the good parts out of the bland parts, and as the party was sneaking up the depression and towards the manor house, I had that angry goddess throw a warm-up bolt straight into the manor house, conveniently obliterating 17 rooms with nothing interesting inside. This scared the crap out of my players because they knew she intended to destroy this island, but apparently she was getting impatient about it, and they didn't know if they were going to be next. They entered the manor by way of room 28, a chapel dedicated to the goddess that she conveniently left standing, and they certainly moved with a sense of urgency. Moving into the manor's central hallway, we get an encounter with many different ways to play and that I love. As the characters move through the door, at just that moment a band of orcs will appear at one end, while a group of goblins appear at the other. There the party finds themselves in this no man's land between two warring factions, friends of neither, and in a constricting hallway. The module suggests the different ways this could go, and my favorite is where the party slips through a door to hide and listens to the sounds of death and carnage just on the other side. Remember, these are either 0th or 1st level characters, so getting in a knockdown drag-out fight with two groups that don't like you is a terrible idea. The module correctly shows players that sometimes not getting in a fight is the smartest thing your character should do. And while the party explored, I had another strike from the heavens annihilate another wing of the manor, which was populated only by pointless rooms. But it heightened the sense of urgency. The party had to get off this island before they were next. Eventually, the old man, Kistake, will show the party to a bookcase concealing the secret door to the treasury of the Sea King, which nobody else has found. And when they descend, the adventure makes sure to ratchet up the tension by telling the DM to let the players know their characters can hear the sound of orcs hot on their trail. I even had a few orcs make it into the room, so some of the characters had to make a desperate stand to fight them off while their companions went down the secret shaft to the tomb of the Sea King below. Which brings us to Episode 5, Into the Catacombs. Once the party is safely into the dark, wet catacombs beneath the manor, Kostaki has a confession to make. He grimly informs the party that he's been lying to them this whole time. Yes, the treasures left to the Sea King are down here somewhere, but no, there is no way off the island to be found. As he flips a switch and collapses rubble into the shaft they just climbed down to escape the orcs, he tells them that this will now be their tomb as well. As the betrayal sinks in for the players, Kostaki is supposed to pull his dagger and try to hasten their journey to the afterlife. When I made the roll for his surprise attack, I rolled a 1, a fumble, and I decided the complication was that this one hit point, frail, crazed old man stabbed at Salahaddin, only to slip on the wet stone beneath him and knock himself out on Salahaddin's parrying fist. It was a laugh. My party got a good chuckle out of that. They were laughing before they even really realized that the old man had screwed them over. And the catacombs and the tomb that follows do not suffer from the map bloat we saw before, and most of the rooms are legitimately interesting. There are traps of falling boxes, collapsing floors, drowning in underground rivers, and more exciting stuff. You'll get to see the full spectrum of Kostaki's crazy and the depths of pettiness this dude would sink to just to spite somebody. The players will eventually find a secret door that leads them down to Episode 6, Break-In. As in, break into the tomb of the Sea King himself. The Sea King and his queen have their separate deathbeds, evocative illustration to match, and the party will soon discover that a poorly thought out wish Kostaki made to the goddess years ago to keep his master as handsome as always turned his master and his wife into members of the undead, who will rise from their deathbeds to attack the party. The party will hear the sounds of the sea nearby, even though they're in a cavernous stone space, and a latch they can find will collapse a wall, revealing the open sea is just outside. Behind a bricked-up wall, they can find the remains of the Sea King's son, Prince Horadel, who is entombed upon a decorative boat built to honor his valor as a warrior of the waves. Serendipitously, while not the most comfortable seagoing vessel, the Prince's sea barge is seaworthy enough to get the party off this island before a goddess who means business destroys the place. While the party struggles to get the Sea Prince's ship to the water, the adventure encourages the DM to tell them they hear the sounds of orcs, who apparently found a way into the catacombs and are still after them. Hopefully, the party takes this as motivation to get out to sea, and when they do, the waves seem to carry them away on choppy waters and beneath a dark and ominous sky. As the orcs prepare to fire on the retreating vessel, the goddess's wrath begins to come down in full force, destroying the island completely as the party sails to freedom and the end of the adventure. Added history and context for Treasure Hunt can be found at a small but informative Wikipedia entry. It mentions that Dungeon Magazine issue 194 has a send-up adventure called Temple of the Weeping Goddess as a kind of successor to Treasure Hunt, which I plan to check out and may review in the future. For most old D&D adventures, DriveThruRPG.com usually includes a short history of the module itself, almost always written by the excellent Shannon Appelkline. She pointed out several neat tidbits, including the fact this is the very first zero-level product written for Dungeons & Dragons, so probably the first for any RPG. The players liked it so much that readers of Dragon Magazine demanded more zero-level rules be published, so TSR soon did. Besides the Dungeon Crawl Classics character funnels I mentioned earlier, I compare the make your PC through play style of adventure to the basic Dungeons & Dragons Black Box set and the Zanzer's Dungeon Adventure, which I've ran at least 10 times. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. While you might have a hard time getting the box set, you can get the PDFs online. For first edition AD&D, there was also the Forgotten Realms adventure Under Illifarn. Unlike Treasure Hunt being basically a bottle adventure where all the actions and possibilities are contained on one island, Under Illifarn is located on the Sword Coast and there's a lot going on. It's a good adventure, but Treasure Hunt seems like the more newbie-friendly of the two. For another in-depth discussion of Treasure Hunt, I refer you to the Goodman Games YouTube and Twitch channels and the show Talking TSR, where the designers agreed that they loved the module, but they picked at a lot of the weaknesses in the adventure's organization and layout. It's good food for thought, and listening to their analyses of classic modules I've found invaluable. I really get a kick out of listening to them, so I encourage you to check them out. Talking TSR. That wasn't that interesting. Well, I have run the adventure and had a great time doing so. I would like to run it again or to play it in the future. I'd just be curious how my character would turn out. If you have ran or played in this adventure, I would love to hear your thoughts and your experiences in the comments, so please drop them down below. And if you enjoyed this review of Treasure Hunt, I do enjoy likes and subscribes, so you know what to do. And now, as we, dear friends, are soon to part, I thank you for your time. I appreciate that you spent it with me. So, until we see each other again, my dear friends, I wish you nothing but the best.